All right. So for a few months now, we have been talking about how, unfortunately, despite there being no default brain, there are a lot of defaults in our society, right? Like defaults of like, oh, this is how healthcare is delivered. This is what it means to like be an adult. This is what it means to be a worker. This is what it means to be a student. Anyway, and that's not true because in fact, we all have different brains that do things differently. And what we don't want is we don't want to be in a situation where we are hammering to try to get that square peg to fit into the round hole. And like, what happens? You destroy the peg. And that is what happens to so many people. So how this connects to access needs are that we all have access needs. Access needs are anything that is required to meaningfully participate in one's environment or community. And as I said, we all have them. This might be physical access needs, emotional, communication, like so all different types of access needs. And so often we get the message that if we have needs, we are in some way needy, and explicitly or implicitly, sometimes, often people get the message that we shouldn't have needs, that it's selfish to have needs. Like that's not a thing, that's a myth. And that is really hard because when we think about full participation in our world, in our lives, the social model of disability is about the barriers in the environment between the person and full participation. And it's not about there being something wrong with the individual, it's about those barriers being in place. And so we want to have as few barriers to full participation as possible. And when we think about how this plays out in interpersonal relationships, I'm going to play a little. I'm going to throw in a little excerpt from a brain club we did in January called "Everyone Flips Their Leg," where there's things that make us stress that are going to differ person to person and like context specific. Like if there's something in the physical environment, like a loud sound. If I'm like well hydrated and well rested, I might not be as stressed as if I'm, haven't done those things or have like a huge cognitive load or whatever, like with this business of the Zoom and the link and the whatever and all the switching between things. If a motorcycle drives by my house right now, I'm gonna flip my lid. Whereas like I might have been okay a couple hours ago. So when we get triggered, when I'm borrowing from a model from Dr. Dan Siegel, Dr. Tina Payne Bryson from the Whole Brain Child, upstairs brain and downstairs brain. When downstairs brain gets triggered, we don't get to pick what triggers us. And sometimes we forget that we have interpersonal access needs. It's not just about sensory processing or like how we learn. It's about access needs in a relationship. What does it mean for downstairs brain to feel safe? And so when we think about, since we all have access needs, often those access needs conflict with other people. And I might play this clip. I might just come back to it. Well, maybe. It depends on if I can just unshare and reshare. There we go. I got to share this sound or it's not going to work.
Oh, we can invite all 12 of your brothers to stay with us. No. Of course we have the room. I don't know, some of them must...
slow down. No one's brothers are staying here. No one is getting married.
Wait, what?
May I talk to you, please? Alone?
No. Whatever you have to say, you can say to both of us.
Fine.
You can't marry a man you just met.
You can if it's true love.
Anna, what do you know about true love?
Well, more than you. All you know is how to shut people out.
You asked for my blessing, but my answer is no. Now, excuse me.
Your Majesty, if I may ease
No,
your...
you may not, and I think you should go. The party is over. Close the gates.
Yes, Your Majesty.
Elsa, no, wait.
Give me my glove.
Elsa, please, I can't live like this anymore.
Then leave.
What did I ever do to you?
Enough, Anna.
No, why? Why do you shut me out? Why do you shut the world out? What are you so afraid of? I said enough!
So, here we have a relationship with two people with access needs. One is looking to assert them by taking space. One has foot on the gas with an access need to communicate right here now. Boom, that didn't work out so well. I'm curious, anybody else ever experienced conflicting access needs in an interpersonal interaction? Get some nods. Relationships are hard. Hi, Matthew. Are you raising your hand to say yes? I have conflicting access needs in interpersonal interactions, or did you want to say something?
Yes, Mel. Yes. Double yes. Yes. Conflicting access needs, but also trying to interpret those needs in a way where the other party makes sense, can understand you too as well. It's just, it goes both ways. And to understand that together is one way to actually, one of the ideas and thoughts of, addressing those access needs. Thank you.
Totally. And especially when we have not, we're not in a culture where it is common for people to actually voice their access needs. Access needs are not implied because, in fact, people are not mind readers.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, I was talking with some folks about friendships and how hard it is to make friends, and that they're constantly worried about the way their friends are going to respond to them, and like worried that they're not going to be able to that they're going to be judged, and that it's pretty stressful. So I'm wondering, I'm wondering how that resonates with others, about worrying about the judgment in social interactions.
For me in the family, the way that I return to regulation, the way that I can bring my nervous system back into reading other people's attunement, reading other people's nervous system, instead of being overwhelmed by my own, whatever it is going on. The best way for me to do that is to get down on the ground. Again, this is me, and this is experiments of years of knowing how to attune. For me, it's squatting down close. It's putting both my hands on the ground for a second, the floor. So I squat and I'm low. There's something about the proprioceptive work. Like, I think because my glutes kick in so much, I'm like, oh, here's my body. And because I get into flexion, I'm like, oh, here I am. This is my contained little nervous system. Putting my hands on the ground feels strong. I feel like, yep, I am strong. I am a strong person. I can do this. So I'm building from the sensory system back into regulation. And I've practiced it enough over the years that I can do it fairly quickly in my nervous system. Those cues kick in safety for my neuroception. And it's subconscious. It is something our brains are always doing all the time. Scanning the environment, scanning the interrelationships, scanning the internal relationship, the internal environment for safety. And we are geared for it. So once we feel it, once we find it, it's what our system wants to go to. That homeostasis is where we want to be cellularly, right?
Yes.
Okay. So for my nervous system, it's that. It's getting low, it's getting grounded. It's softening my face, like actively saying, let your eyes soften. Don't create some expected emotion. So that like that shame, fear response might create this expected like, oh, I'm okay, right? Like everything's fine. Can you tell this isn't really a smile? Like, but it's what we do because it's what we've been socialized to do. So actively neutralizing, softening my face. And then like something about the environment for me usually helps. Find the horizon, look at a tree root, some sort of cue to me that's like, there's no saber-toothed tiger here. There's no gaping hole that's going to suck you into the hot molten lava of the middle of the earth. This is solid ground.
So you're describing that you begin with a bottom-up strategy. You get into your body and you ground yourself, whatever that means to you. You ground yourself, and then you have access to your cortex where you are cortically mediating your limbic response, because now you have access to your cortex because you did that initial bottom-up softening to take the edge off, to like bring your cortex back online, and then you go to that. I think a lot of people skip right to that, or they try to skip right to that, and they don't have access to their cortex, and you can't skip it. You have to do something to access your cortex. Yep. And there's an element of like when you're in the thick of it, even if you're like already screaming and like actively flipping your lid, you don't have access to the impulse control to stop. You may not even be able to like metacognitively like zoom out and watch yourself. You just don't have access to that. So it's really just like, it's happening, get to the ground, if that's how you ground, like something in your body.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And it's experimental for a while. It's trial and error to figure out what your physical somatosensory system responds to. And then once that's a cue of safety for your physical sensory being, it grows, it gets stronger. And sometimes maybe it needs tweaking, like, when my knees can't squat anymore, and hopefully not for another 20 years, I'll have to figure something else out.
Right. The other thing is that if someone knows that their go-to self-reg plan is a top-down, trying to use their cortex.
Yep.
One thing that I've found helpful is to prepare ahead of time what I'm wanting my cortex to do.
Yep.
Because if I can like ideate and motor plan it ahead of time, I can maybe access it as like automatic, like an automatic loop I can pull in, as opposed to trying to use it in the moment, because then it becomes not a stop, impulse control stop. It's like, don't like foot's on the gas already. Don't try to step on the brake of stop screaming at your kid. It's I'm going to go to my automatic loop. And so for me, that is like the like I said before, the mantra of like the relationship is primary, like whatever that like a thought I can try, even if I don't have full access to my cortex, that I can try that. I mean, it doesn't work maybe, but like it might work a lot better than like, I'm going to talk myself out of how this is okay. Right.
Well, I mean, and this is also gets to some of the cores of like, there's the unnumberable amounts of different brains. You think, when we've talked about this, you think in specific word patterns, always. Your directions are in go left at and 2 stoplights, then so your brain does everything in that language space. And I do not. I do pictures, and I know which rock is at the driveway that I want to drive into, not where it is on the street in words ways. So I think that's also just a self-awareness piece of what works for your brain, and language works for yours.
I feel so seen right now.
I mean, the language doesn't work great in my brain. So to start to do like an internal talk in the midst of feeling really dysregulated is just like, oh, that would be too much work.
Yeah. And so it begins with self-awareness of like what actually calms you.
Right.
And maybe even developing an awareness of like your go-to patterns of how you negotiate life, even when you're like generally regulated enough.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Which then, I mean, gives you that base of being able to have the space for your family to feel safe and heard and seen. Because I mean, the goal is acceptance and connection for all of us. And that requires me also having that grace and acceptance of like, I understand myself sometimes.
So Luna and I have been discussing power lately because like she's 5 and what's modeled for her like in video games or cartoons is like power over people. And like power over people feels gross to me as a PDAer. Like I don't want power over me, and I don't want to have power over people because it's gross. So like we watch a lot of My Little Pony, where like the messages are that the people seeking power over, they never prosper. It's the power of friendship, the power of connection, the power of co-regulation, which is like, you know, like a reciprocal power. Like it's just, anyway. So like we've been talking about like just like the different kinds of power and where do we get power? Because I feel like the like transformation from like, you know, like the traumatic transformation toward narcissism. Because like, I mean, you can start off as, you know, like, you know, you're like a little kid and everyone has power over you and you like seek out to have power over, like you don't have power, you seek your power, you want to claim your power. And like, if you only know about power over, you go down that train, right? And like, if you don't have connection, like, anyway, like, what do you think about this as a concept?
Yeah, I think it really aligns too with the role of punishment in relationships and how power over that, the main leverage that you get if you have power over somebody is both controlling them and punishing them. And I think that like manipulating their behavior towards your good, and if they aren't aligned with that, then they deserve to be hurt for their transgression. And you know, that's our world. Like we literally live in systems built on that.
Yes.
And for our kids, they're trying to make sense of what happens when something is transgressed. Like what do we do when a line is broken, or like within the trust, like trust gets broken or connection gets severed and we make mistakes basically. And so in a power over relationship, what happens around mistakes? Well, mistakes are punished. And in a power with, or a power like in a co-regulation relationship where, I mean, power doesn't even, the power is in the connection.
Right. Totally. And because I feel like, and like, I'm even hearing language from my 5-year-old, like a thing that comes out a lot when like I make a mistake and then she'll say something like, you know, so like she might like, you know, and she'll be like, that's what you get for X. And I'm like, where did you get? I mean, there's like a lot of things she says and I'm like, damn it, that came from me. But like, I don't say that. That one doesn't come out. Maybe I think it, Or like maybe I don't know, I don't even know, like, is it TV? Is it, I have no idea. I have no idea what, like my husband or like, I have no idea like if somebody actually says that. But like I think that it's just the narrative constructed from observations of the world. That's what you get for X, as opposed to like, you know, like we have a pediatric occupational therapist on our board who I like would love for you to meet, Hannah Bloom, who she talks a lot about the cycle of repair, and like, you know, so like, you know, we're all gonna transgress, we're all gonna make mistakes, but like it's the repair that closes that loop. And you know, like most of us grew up in a world where there was no repair, you know, just like, you know, punish, 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 you know, flip your lid, which is, you know, normal to flip your lid, but like, you know, no repair.
Yeah, absolutely. And the repair with yourself is what I see, especially for my kids, that they're externalizing, like that's what you get for, is what they say to themselves too. Like when they make a mistake, then they're saying, well, of course your grown up is going to ignore you or yell at you because that's what you get. You messed up. And this sense that they deserve punishment is really hard to repair because our world is reinforcing that. And so it's kind of like, that's the cosmic repair work, is repairing that relationship with yourself, where you have the capacity to say, I'm a person who makes mistakes, and I'm also a person who knows how to make things right. That's our family language, is we all make mistakes, but we know how to make it right. And that helps us to keep coming back to repair rather than choosing what's kind of an easier path. Like punishment and isolation it's the dominant narrative. To step outside of that is what's hard.
Because like, I think a lot of people who have grown up in a paradigm of like, you do the thing when the people with power over tell you to do the thing. And like, when like zoomed out to be like, do you see how that's setting people up for like bad, dangerous things? And they're like, oh, no, I never thought about that. Now I thought about that. I'm like,
you know, if you're designing a playground, not everybody, you know, needs to go follow the same path, right, to get to the top of the hill. But everybody has to have a path to get to the top of the hill when you're designing those things. And that kind of visual, because it's such a good visual in my mind, for me at least, and it was really helpful in thinking about everything. You know, that principle of universal accessibility. If I design this meeting, workplace, playground, so that everybody can access it in some way, they don't have to be able to do you don't not have a ladder to get to the thing because, you know, some people can't use ladders. You know, you just being able to design so everybody had access, and equitable access, right? And kind of removing the barriers, the visuals we all use. As part of that, I think neurodiversity was a real big feature to that. Thinking about how somebody, whether they be, you know, autistic or Asperger's, or just have light sensitivities or hearing sensitivities or crowd sensitivities, how you could create spaces and places and programs and meetings that allow for that variety. Or how you create a workplace that accommodates the variety. And at United Way, we've tried to think about what we're doing externally, but also thinking about the people who do the work here and supporting them in that journey.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And I think that, you know, sometimes people, when they have that visual of physical access, you know, as it relates to mobility related disability, visible disabilities, that maybe is, for some people, how they can begin to think about this lens. And then they can maybe take the next step to say, well, invisible disabilities, it's just as important to think about how everyone has to get to the top of the hill, and to have multiple paths to be able to do that. So, you know, it's interesting because a lot of people who struggle in their workplaces, they don't know that they have an invisible disability. So they don't have language to talk about it because they don't know that's what's the barrier between them and the top of the hill. They may just know that they're struggling. And I think that when an organization is large enough to have like a human resources division, if the top-down lens isn't, you know, oh, this person has this disability, and they need accommodations for, like, if the kind of that flag is not checked, it may not come into the conversation. It might be, you know, some organizations talk about, you know, we have disciplinary problems, we have difficult employees, or like when I was chief resident during my training, we had, you know, difficult learners. Like, but really, this was neurodivergence with barriers to access. And this is how this played out. So it's like a total lens shift. When we think about some explanations for why people are struggling, why people are dysregulated, why people are, you know, the conflicting access needs, they are about access needs.
I think it really relates, Mel, from my experience as a leader too, what I've seen is that it's directly relevant to the way we treat physical healthcare and mental health care, right? So if you think about physical healthcare where we have access to that, right? Look, health insurance, it's not affordable, but it's accepted, and it's also not seen as a choice thing, right? If you get those type of physical ailments, it's not seen as you chose to X, Y, and Z, right? And what we're struggling with as a community around mental health, and we don't give that the same time, right? So you take a sick day because you're physically sick, or you take a sick day because you broke your leg. Everybody's like, right on, good for you. Yeah, rest up, heal up. If you are brave enough to say, I need a mental health day, right? My brain needs a break. And that could be whether you have a disability or not. We don't accept that. Like, it's, you know, toughen up, right? That's the American like ideal, right? Is that you brain-wise be pushed through. And because we start with that, so if you start there, and that's for everybody with privilege and able-bodied, and then you try and add in a disability to that, well, now you're not only going up against accessibility issues, you're going up against cultural norms that are just incredibly difficult to overcome. And the disruption to the work environment and the way in which we expect people to show up 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, has changed fundamentally. And organizations that have not necessarily adopted, that can and have not adopted the flexibility, are the ones, in many cases, everybody's struggling for workforce, but you're compounding that issue by not accepting and talking about that. And so,
but you named the thing, which is that in 2022, so many organizations are struggling to fill their open positions, and they're struggling to retain their existing workforce. And, I see that and I'm like, yeah, it's because you're not talking about neurodiversity and access. You could do but do you have thoughts about how that's connected from a CEO perspective?
For sure. I think that the workforce challenges, many of them are rooted in, we still have old structures in terms of our work expectations as a society, right? And it's and not that every other countries have this perfect and right, and many are way worse than we are in terms of accommodating. Some do it better, and some of that is cultural. Examining, if we had the space and time and capacity to examine what are the systemic barriers that are keeping people from being part of the workforce, because we all need to work, I mean, not the kids, they got to go to school and you got to, but we all, we do, it's part of society. It's not just a means to an end for myself. It's not just how I pay my rent or mortgage or I feed my family. It's how everybody does it. That's kind of where the whole thing's based on that. And we don't all have the privilege of getting a tremendous amount of value from what we do, like you and I do, right? Of like, we need people to do the X thing. And there's a need for that. And it's not always altruistic or rewarding in the same way. But if we think about how do we make it so that people want to work in our environments, whether it's making a thing, right? Or it's community building, or it's healthcare, and when I say healthcare, I mean all of healthcare, mental health care, physical health care. You could probably think about how we're addressing a lot of those things. And there are so many barriers that keep people in the way of being employed. It's one of the things Working Bridges works a lot on, with the social determinants that get in the way. So you've got childcare, housing, transportation, food insecurity, all of these things, and wages, of course, stacked on top of that. You then start getting into the issues of, well, what's the barrier in terms of the work environment, and what is expected of me in terms of how I'm showing up to do X thing that you've hired me to do. And so I think it plays a huge role in, those intersectionality of all of those things are oftentimes what keep people from being part of the workforce.
So much of what you've said is about the way you see the world. And that's what sets the tone of leadership, is that you actually believe that we all do things differently, and that you can shift the environment around so that the people who work for you thrive. If you don't have that lens, nothing you're going to do is going to feel real to your people.
But if you start with, we are all human, and my colleagues talk a lot about human-centered design in terms of meetings and spaces and doing those things, you get a lot farther. I think you can have a lot more space. And maybe culturally, one of the big things that we miss and we lack in today's day and age is the ability to have a conversation with each other and be a little bit vulnerable on both ends of, I don't know what I don't know.